welcome to the story of us, living with chronic illnesses while loving, thriving, and making our way through this thing called life. This is Love Chronically.
Okay, this is cool. It's interesting. It's like, where do we start?
At the beginning.
Who's beginning?
Ours.
So the beginning starts through how we met, how we came to find out our situation, and
Well, no, because that's the whole first episode. We're not supposed to give them the whole first episode, babe.
all right. So we got to give them a teaser.
What did we say we're going to talk about? This is the issue. This is the problem with two people on a podcast with ADHD and chronic illnesses on top of that.
All right. Well, let's just start from I am 48.
You are.
Black male. Suspect, it looks like. No, 48 black male. Jamaican born, American raised. Big up, big up.
Oh God, you're gonna start with
My
the horn.
horn wasn't ready. You see?
There's a reason for that.
You
Your
see?
horn isn't ready because it's not meant for your horn to be ready.
I think this is important to say. I am divorced.
Okay.
So I've been here before. I came through the door.
What door?
Eric B. I came through the door.
I know.
Can you finish the song?
No, I cannot. I won't. I don't want you buzzing me in with your ridiculous sounds.
So divorced, and as I started to learn what divorce life was like, I got some news that would add to the complexity of now having a new normal. That was fun.
I bet.
Yeah. We can pause at any time we want.
You're gonna pause? No, I told you we're gonna run straight through. So this is what it's like.
Yeah, so that's how I think we're starting it off. So
did you give people your name? I don't know if you did.
I did.
You did?
I said
okay.
My name was...
Your name was Danielle.
Danielle from Compton.
Okay, you're not from Compton.
Not from Compton. From New York. From Upper West Side. I'm from a lot of places.
Okay, don't tell people all the places you live. Don't give people your address.
Yeah, you're right.
It's okay.
Just New York, not upstate.
New York, not upstate. That's a good way to put it.
917 area code.
Nice.
So if you know, you know. What started us is I saw you, and I figured I thought you were from a different country.
Okay. We are not going to get into that discussion on this podcast, but go ahead. Maybe a different episode.
Yeah. And I thought we'd be talking about like
walks on the beach.
Like, I don't know, like food from your homeland. It turns out you're from New York.
I grew up there, but yeah, it's been funny. See what happens when you try to run away from things?
Yeah, you run into it.
You run right into it.
I was done with New Yorkers.
That's nice. Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
I was actually thinking, not New York.
Not New York. Gotcha.
Anywhere else.
Anywhere but New York. That's interesting.
Is there a name for the head wrap you had on?
It was just a head wrap.
Oh, it's no fancy ethnic name for it.
It was a head wrap.
Maybe the way it was tied is your name for the knot you used.
I did not. I don't remember what I slapped that thing on top. So I did that. I took those pictures when we right at the beginning of COVID.
Oh wow.
And we were doing, it was a challenge, and I think it was like the whole your tribe challenge. And I was asked by another priest if I would do one. And so it became this whole big, the video turned out great, but and then I thought, you know what, I have this head wrap on, I have this makeup on, I might as well take a few pictures, and actually ended up with some really nice headshots that I've been using on and off since then. So I thought I would use one of those in my dating profile. Oh my God, I can't. Okay, so we might not get past this teaser if you keep
opportunity to use the horn.
It was not.
Yeah, you spiced up your dating profile with the head wrap.
I didn't spice it up. Anywho, my name is Celie, and I was diagnosed with at that time stage 3 endometriosis in September of 2001.
Wow.
So I have been living with and thriving through now stage 4 endometriosis and a surgery this year. This has been a big year. Lots going on. And I think within that whole situation, I've been really wanting to know your thoughts about how that experience has been for you. Because I think this was like the first time it was pretty major surgery. I had excision surgery with an endometriosis specialist, and we can get into what all these things are. Again, this is a teaser. You guys have to wait until the first episode first to get into the nitty-gritty of things. But
well, I mean, let me start from a different place really quick.
Sure.
I think the whole introduction into what we're doing is not complete unless I tell them what I was diagnosed with as well.
Okay.
I don't remember the year now. I want to say 2018, 19. Diagnosed with Parkinson's, early onset. So that was pretty interesting to discover, because for the most part I've been very active and healthy my whole life. So that's a new normal that I had to get used to, and still learning it. And now wrap that in with being divorced, dating, and having to really, if you want to be upfront and forthright with your health history, right? You gotta let your partner know.
Right.
The anxiety comes with that. So, the whole thing is you got two people going through something.
Right.
Right? In real life. And how do you navigate that? And we thought it'd be fun to tell our story.
Yeah, I think I think we came to it pretty open with what we were dealing with, disclosing what's been going on and what's happened for a lot of, I think we each had our reasons, and I think the reasons kind of lined up. It was important for me because, again, not knowing what that meant and what things would look like moving forward, just because of my situation, you were upfront from day one about it as well. I think it started things off on a different foot, so to speak, right? Now you have everything on the open. Here's where we are. So I feel like the bar for vulnerability is set pretty straight out the gate. And so that was something I think, certainly, I go to therapy. So that was something that, came up, something that we talked about. Just because of the fact that it was something that we were going to have to deal with and contend with, right? And looking at it, obviously you go out and, you start to date and you're just thinking about maybe where you're going to have dinner or where you're going to have, drinks or coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I think you have to think about, well, what happens, after the next date or the next date.
Oh yeah. And I think right now with the way technology is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, oh, our first little technical
Mm,
pause.
nope,
We're still recording.
we're still recording.
Like, yeah, I think like right now, the way technology is to me, it's almost like speed dating, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so how much of yourself do you want to disclose right away? Do you want to get all down into the weeds and then discover this not the person you like anyway? You know, I think for me, it was very important to just be upfront and honest
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, because I've said this before, I really want the person to have all the information to make a decision, whether you want to stay with someone who's chronically ill, not knowing what that comes with, or you can run,
Right.
So I think that was my baseline. I wanted to be starting off at ground zero with everyone kind of knowing what could happen, the potential, what may come. I think that's important in relationships where you're,
It is.
you know, um, and and being able to be vulnerable. I think that was something I needed to work on and still working on it, especially, coming from a Caribbean culture. It's
Right.
not easy to really be vulnerable.
Right.
It's not something we practice.
Well, it's something that you used to practice. I feel like you practice it a lot more now.
Yeah. In the present tense, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think for me, when we started talking about the podcast, it came about because we always end up, I think, because we started things off literally in vulnerable waters, it's always felt like we have all of this dialogue and all these conversations around all kinds of topics, right? Just life, relationships, pretty open and pretty, I think, we end up getting into some really good discussions that come naturally. And as we were talking about and thinking about our experience, especially with, my surgery this year, it became like wanting to talk about it in a very real way because we also don't hear about folks. I hear a lot of, I'm being in a lot of groups around, you know, my illness. I get to see a lot of the negativity or a lot of the bad things that people go through that women experience around having a chronic illness, right? In the big with the big picture of relationship in mind. And so I think that not I wanted to make sure that we were having some of these conversations out in the open. It's conversations I've had with you, and it's conversations that I've had with my friends, but really shining a light on the fact that there are people that are either born with a chronic illness or, pick one up along the way. And there's still all of this humanity that gets stripped away, I think, once we get into the topic of having a relationship, right? And we have pretty standard issues, we have pretty standard conversations, right? We just have this additional, you know layer that we have to be mindful of. I just thought it was important for us to talk about it because I often feel like folks that um, are either neurospicy or have a chronic illness, again, whatever that might look like, often get sidelined either out of the dating scene or even in the greater discussion of being in a relationship. And that's hard because you still, I still wanted to have a relationship, even though there were days that I didn't want to get out of bed. And I still wanted to have someone and a partner and all of that, all of the things that we know to be true around being partnered, and having that additional thing to get past, or that additional thing in your bag, uh, was always a question, because I've seen kind of how it turns out with some folks sometimes. You know what I mean?
Of course. Don't mind me. Sometimes I make a note so I don't lose my
That's
train of
fine.
thought. I think people don't understand how nerve wracking it is finding out you have a chronic condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then trying to enter the dating world. And I can tell you firsthand, it's not as Disney as you think it is. You know, people don't always take it like take it the way you want them to take it. For example, I remember being on a date and not really knowing my condition. I thought it was maybe a car accident I was in. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going based upon that info. But the person that I was on the date with said, "Hey, you walk like one of my patients,"
Right.
and I really didn't know how to think. But you know, automatically you go into your head like, "Oh my God, what does that mean? Do I walk crippled? And damn, have I been walking crippled this whole time and no one's told me?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then as the date goes on, now you're in your head because you look at the way they're looking at you, hold the glass, and they're trying to diagnose what's wrong with you. And, you know, it's nerve wracking, you know, and to the point where you have conversations and you might not get a phone call back.
Right. Yeah, but I think that that was like when you first told me about that story, I thought it was interesting because that was a blessing because it got you to a diagnosis, which you didn't have before.
Right, right. So it got me to a diagnosis, which I didn't have before. And I had to get out of my own way because, you know, and I think sometimes there's messages coming through that you really got to listen to
Mm-hmm.
because the person was heavy set and I felt like, you know, the person kind of misrepresented themselves in the picture I saw, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So when they said something about my condition, I was like, well, hey, you're not perfect either, and I was more focused on that. But like you said, something was nagging at me that I needed to go get it checked out. But
Mm-hmm.
I can just imagine if you don't have confidence in yourself and you're on a date and you're on a dating site, it's a lot of anxiety trying to figure out, do I share this with somebody? Do I uh, tell them about my condition? And at what point do I say something?
Right.
You know,
I mean, it's, I always say like lead with it, but it's hard because you don't, then you get to, I mean, I don't know. I always say lead with it up front and then whatever it is, you can just be done with it. But that's always been my thought process, I think, because I don't have a visible condition,
hmm
which is the other thing. Like I look quote unquote normal. So it was always important for me to kind of lead with that just because, and I mean, I talk about it all the time on social too. So, it's like I can't hide it, but I think it was important for me because I didn't want it to be, something that came up later on.
hmm
And especially like, earlier on when I was dating and the whole idea of having children, like it just, for me, that there was a whole other complication as well because of that. But yeah, I always say lead with it. And then obviously unfortunately, you're going to have some heartbreak and some not so good feelings because you are opening yourself up to being rejected.
I say you lead with it, and then it's a weeding out process. You can't make the wrong presentation for the right person, right?
Right.
So someone who is part of your tribe is going to feel for you. Whatever you're putting down, you know, they're going to be open to. Um, but at least you're giving the person a chance to make a decision because this is your life. You know,
Right.
this is the rest of your life, and you know things may not look the same in a few years from now the way they look now.
And it's a lot to take in. And it's, I think, a responsibility on both sides, right? Because there's a lot that comes with it. And it feels like you get to play both roles, right? You get to be the caregiver and the patient. It
Hmm.
just depends on what day of the week,
Yeah.
or or what. Yeah, it just depends on when that comes.
The caregiver and the patient. And I think that's thought. We can talk about this later on, maybe in a future episode, but that's the scary thought.
Is it?
Can you hit?
Yeah. Why do you? Why is it scary?
Um, when you're a caregiver, I think the perception I have is there's a separation between. It depends how much care you're invoking. If the person's like really in a situation where you're there for them, changing their clothes, bathing, the relationship changes.
Right.
I'm not sure where I'm going with it, but I know there's a change. There's not as romantic as maybe it once might be, and there has to be a shift there. When you start cleaning asses, there has to be a shift.
Well, I yes, but I think that that's where it's important to have open dialogue, and it's important to know what things might look like, so you can start making decisions early on as to what that's going to look like. And I think for me too, I feel like I cheated a little bit in this whole, even like at the beginning of the discussion, because I know someone, like my great aunt was married to someone that had Parkinson's.
Mm.
So I know what this looks like. And then there was also a lot of discussion. Literally, like there, again, I tell you all the time, like this is I'm taking this to therapy, and that was one of the things. And it was a discussion that had to be had because making sure that I've always been in a caregiver role, making sure that I wasn't just falling into a caregiver role because that's who I was,
Hmm.
that I actually wanted to be with this person, that I liked this person, that we were aligned. Like it just was a lot to take into consideration, and not just that caregiver piece, right? But also, I think it does change and it does vary because it's not always going to be that. And for me, it does, like, things change, but things don't. And I think one of the things my therapist had talked about was how important it was for us to create intimacy and vulnerability early on, because that's like the thing that we would always be coming back to. Right. And so I always think about it when I'm thinking about caregiving, thinking about what that intimacy looks like and what it might look like later on.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about it, and this is from my
Eh,
limited scope,
but wait, let me say this. When I'm talking about intimacy in the relationship, not just sex. So I will say that, because intimacy and sex are different things.
I think once you start, I think I haven't done it, but I can try to put myself in that mindset. I think once you start cleaning someone's butt, I think something changes. I think once you start doing those manual activities on your partner, I think something fundamentally changes uh, in the way that you see intimacy, privacy, maybe affection. It might just be me. Maybe I need to go take this up with Catherine, my therapist.
I think you might.
But what do you think about that? I think I can't be the only one. I think something changes.
I mean, so I think so. If would you have been open to helping me with those things after my surgery? And do you think that if you wiping my ass after surgery, like, would that have changed something about us? Because we've had the instance, right, very recent, where I've had to be cared for.
I think I would be open to it. I think it changes when it's one thing when you know something's temporary. Like I'm taking a bus because I'm waiting for my car to get fixed, right?
Right.
But my license is suspended forever, and this is my new normal. It's a little bit different, though.
Okay.
I think you can kind of like, you know, when something's permanent, then it's a, you know, it's different. And I never dealt with it, but I feel like, you know, as a guy, that's something I worry about.
Okay.
You know, I don't know what life is going to look like in the future. What if I'm not able to do certain things? In my brain, is it shame? Is it just the fear of not knowing? Or, you know, does something changes when someone has to help you with certain things? You know, like for my grandmother, I feel like she, when it got to the point where she had to, you know, she really couldn't care for herself.
And she had to depend on somebody else.
I think I think she was done. She was like, no, you know.
Hmm. I think that's interesting. Well, I think it's interesting because I've had the pleasure of caregiving for people from my family and have seen people in my family also give care. I think that it's really important. You know, again, we can. I think we might have an episode talking about this later. Um, you have to look at everything that you do around also having the discussion regarding dignity,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that's like super important. And I think that's part of it, some of the shame and all that, because people do deal with that, right? People have that. And I think some of it is shame. And I think some of it is just not having the experience and stepping into it, not knowing. And I think the unknown is sometimes difficult. You know, I think it's difficult to wrap our heads around what that might look like.
Dignity. I think that's a term we'd have to get familiar with. Learning learning how to be more what's the word, conscious
Hmm.
of that.
Yeah, I mean, and that comes from that's the vulnerability part,
Mm-hmm.
that's the intimacy part, right? The dignity part. I think too, when I'm talking about it from the perspective of, you know, in the past has been older folks, right? Like I'm really gung ho about making sure that older folks have their dignity as they're getting older, right? Because things change and we sometimes don't treat them the same way, or if they are ill and need to be cared for, right? Having that perspective of making sure that they have dignity. But I also think that when we're talking about overall an illness or, you know, whatever that might look like, whatever that entails, that dignity is always the thing. A lot of times when we're talking about people with chronic illnesses and, you know, looking at how they get, how I say they, because sometimes it doesn't, I tell people all the time that sometimes it feels like I never really like, it never drilled into my head that I was chronically ill, which is
Yeah.
something that I've had to kind of get used to in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't really, I think it wasn't until, gosh, August, maybe September, when I literally had to, you know, one of my sessions, I, I sat there and it just hit me like I have a disability right now, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't able to do, there was so much I wasn't able to do. And it was difficult to talk about it, especially because again, everyone sees you and you look fine. So, you know, but outside of that, when we're looking at this as a whole, there's always this idea when I'm, you know, when I've looked at the bills in Congress and all of that, right? There's always this thing that we have done as a society, and that's to kind of take dignity away from people that have chronic illnesses, you know, and people with disabilities. That's something that I'm mindful of when I'm thinking about this as a whole, because it affects us on a personal note when we're talking about caregiving, you know, in a very small circle. But the bigger picture is that I feel like oftentimes people with disabilities don't get treated with dignity at all.
You know, and
Um,
just to piggyback on that, I think, and you asked me about what was it like going through your surgery,
yeah.
and I went around just to give some history
Hmm.
before I started going there. But, you know, to be truthfully honest, that was the first time I've kind of dealt with, whether it be a friend or someone I'm in a relationship, going through a major procedure. I've been
Mm-hmm.
blessed enough that the people in my life, really close to me, have not undergone certain surgeries, but that was actually my first time. So it was a roller coaster of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
but a few things I was happy to see. Like, that's the first time I saw like a team of just minority professionals, it was like a coalition, a rainbow
The Rainbow
coalition
Coalition.
of doctors. It was dope, and they all knew each other. They came together. They met. They spoke. They coordinated. All right, so we're gonna do this. You're gonna do that. Da 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 da. I was like, oh, that's kind of dope. I never seen that from that perspective before. Um, and it was nerve wracking because surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard horror stories, but it was cool that someone came back to give me some kind of update every once in a while. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, um,
Were you sitting out in the waiting area the entire time?
I was, and then family came, and then I kind of went to get some fresh air and came back. But you know, that was one experience. I can imagine if that's a regular thing for
Mm-hmm.
loved ones. That's a lot to get used to. Um, and especially if it's your first time, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're used to it, then you're used to it. But if everything happens all at once and now this is your new normal with that new ramp up, but it was deep. I was thinking about the worst case scenario. How do you feel? Like, financially, how does it impact all these thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
You know. So yeah, that was my first time going through that.
Nice.
First time going through that. But I had I, I, I always felt like everything would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So once you woke up, I was like, all right, first part's done. We're gonna tackle the rest.
Yep. And we have been tackling the rest.
Mm-hmm. So the whole thing behind the podcast is, wow, we can't be the only ones going through this, right?
Yep.
And if life experience is a teacher, then I don't know, maybe some aspect of what we're doing, how we're interacting, how we're moving can, help someone else.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Teach one.
yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I've spoken to other people about it, and before we even started down this road, and I think that's also part of the reason why I thought this would be something for us to try and to do, because the biggest thing is always you feeling like you're just on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I know caregiving, that's always the thing, right? But certainly adding the additional layer of being in a relationship and starting a new relationship, right? Because
starting a relationship, being in one, it's so much, and I think I'm lucky, that I'm meeting the right person at the right time, because
Aww. Where's your horn? You see, this is where your horn would have been perfect, but no, you only want to do your horn whenever I say something ridiculous.
no, my screen went dead.
I'm sorry. I know I derailed you. Apologies.
You embarrassed our sound guy.
Apologies. I embarrassed
Frederick. I'm sorry, Frederick.
Don't bring Fred. Look, I do not want to get sued by Frederick. Please do not even say Frederick.
That's our sound guy. No, she's not gonna sue you, Frederick.
You're ridiculous.
They don't know what type of studio we have.
They don't need to know about it. Baby. Just don't talk about Frederick.
All right. What was I saying?
You were talking about how wonderful and fabulous I am. Continue.
Yes. That's
exactly where you were off.
No bullshit.
Listen, that's where you were. I don't know what to tell you. You shouldn't be sounding your. See? You should not be sounding your horn. You should be paying attention to what you're saying.
No, but I think illness scares people,
It does.
and I feel like, the thought of this person could not be here one day really, really scares people. And you might not want to, embark in a relationship. And sometimes people don't know how to feel, and I hope that us talking about it can make it a little bit more easy, normal to have a discussion,
Yeah.
Pretty sure we'll have some information that we can share.
Yes. We will have links. We will have resources. And then we will accumulate a lot of this, I think, from the crowd. Because, we have a list, certainly, but I feel like there's so many more resources that we might not know about that hopefully we'll have access to, or we'll have someone point us in the right direction so we can share more resources as we go along.
Yes. If you build it,
they will come. Oh my God. Okay.
I caught that one, baby. Well,
I'm confiscating the horn.
I think this is cool for an intro, right? This little,
I guess,
fireside chat.
Fireside chat. Yeah. We're going to have to figure out the rest, but in the meantime.
What's the name of the podcast?
Oh, did we not say the name of the podcast?
No, you started talking to people.
You started talking to people. You were the first one. The name of the podcast is Love Chronically. Oh my, okay, I can't.
That was it.
Are you going to keep doing that?
Fred, can you chill with the horn, bro?
Please tell him to stop hitting the horn.
My horn guy.
Yes. Yeah, so it is Love Chronically. I thought it would be a fun play on words. And it's really the story of us living with chronic illnesses. I'm going to read this just like this because you're staring at me. Living with chronic illnesses while loving, thriving, and making our way through this thing called life, which is kind of what we're doing. Do not hit the horn.
No, I ran out of...
You ran out of horns? Beautiful. I love it. All right. So we will be coming to you in January. Season 1 kicks off. Stay tuned. Sign up. Subscribe.
Wherever you listen to your podcast and music.
Absolutely.
That was cool. Guys, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for bearing with us and these horns.
Yes. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
See ya.